Breaking news. Boeing 737 MAX planes are now grounded around the world, including here in the United States. But the stock ending the day slightly higher, still, though, having its worst week in 3 years. Let's get to Contessa Brewer, who's been covering the story for us back at headquarters. Contessa.
Hi there, Sarah. The FAA says it got newly refined satellite data that led to the decision to ground the Boeing MAX aircraft. The grounding is temporary while the investigation continues, but this is a dramatic reversal from the support the FAA was voicing even late yesterday about the safety of this particular aircraft. The acting FAA administrator just talked on CNBC about how new information led investigators to see similarities between the two deadly crashes, a likeness in the aircraft movement of the Ethiopian Airlines crash and the Lion Air crash.
The full track of the flight, the Ethiopian flight, was very close to Lion Air. The initial track that we got on Sunday and Monday morning was only 3 minutes long, the first 3 minutes of the flight. The new track data we looked at was almost for the entire length of the flight. Also, the evidence that we discovered on the ground actually was even further evidence that the flight was very similar to Lion Air.
In the order to ground the Boeing 737, both MAX 8 and MAX 9, quote, the acting administrator has determined that an emergency exists related to safety in air commerce. The data recorder, the cockpit voice recorder were damaged in the crash, and special equipment is needed to extract the information from them. So now those data recorders will go to France. Ethiopia is leading the investigation with assistance from the FAA and the NTSB. Now, interestingly, FlightAware sent out a statement saying that it and its partners at Ariane, and this was just confirmed by the acting administrator, had provided the data on Flight 302. It's part of the information they use to monitor these planes globally that is now contributing to the investigation, and we now know that it was potentially instrumental in having the FAA ground these flights. Boeing has also given us a statement. We want to read that to you as well. Basically, it says that Boeing continues to have full confidence in the safety of these 737 MAXs. However, after consultation with the FAA, the NTSB, and aviation authorities, that they are going to support out of an abundance of caution and to reassure the flying public, they're going to support the grounding of their planes. Now, after plummeting some 3.5% on the news, Boeing's share price rebounded. It closed up 0.5%. And the airlines, by the way, Southwest, American, United, they all say they're working with passengers to facilitate rebooking. There might be some short-term pain on that front, Melissa.
All right, Contessa, thank you. Contessa Brewer back at headquarters with the very latest. So analysts on Wall Street this morning saying the long-term impact could be minimal. The stock actually was higher today, as Contessa had mentioned, after being down 11% in the past 2 days. So you got to ask yourself, is the Boeing bottom for this incident in? Guy.
Great to be back. I miss
back.
everybody.
Big welcome Guy back, everybody.
Welcome back, Guy.
I mean, this is like fantastic. I think the short-term bottom might be in. And why do I say that? Well, the stock obviously traded pretty well today. I happen to think President Trump did the right thing, and I think he probably did Boeing, the company, a big favor by doing this. It takes a degree of uncertainty out of the equation, and I do think it's going to be short-lived in terms of how the stock reacts. We had a huge volume day yesterday. We had a huge volume day today. That typically, to me, says capitulation. The Boeing story fundamentally, I don't think, has changed. Still a huge free cash flow story. Plus, are people really going to try to now back out of deliveries for this plane and get into an A320? It's just not feasible. So I think they'll straighten this out. And I think a couple weeks from now, we'll be talking about Boeing being a $420 stock again.
Yeah, I agree with that. I think this was good for Boeing to, as Guy said, take the uncertainty out of the equation. I think they made a mistake not doing it themselves. However, they can now sort of draft under the cover of the FAA and the president. I think it's the right thing for them. I agree with Guy. I think because this is now, I think it is contained. Right? I think it's contained. And so even if we see either for Boeing or for the airlines, some increased expenses because you have to swap planes, that's always expensive. Maybe they even have some insurance if they have to do that. But that will be short-lived. So I think this is very good for Boeing. I think the bottom is in.
What is the short term? Because to put this in perspective, the Lion Air crash, we still don't know the cause of the Lion Air crash, and that was nearly 6 months ago. And here we are on to our second crash. So what is short term? Because we've been 6 months and we didn't know the cause of that one. This could be another 6 months. We don't know how long these planes are going to be grounded. What are some of the unknowns? You're a Boeing investor. You hold it. You like it. You still stand by it. But what are some of the unknowns?
Well, so Melissa, I think you have to reference again, go back to 2012 into 2013 when you had the lithium battery incidents, and in both cases, and then back to 1988 when when the 737 was a new airplane. On the first couple of deliveries within the first year, there was two fatal flights. But the reality of the FAA cycle and grounding the MAX 737s is something we have seen before. It's something that is protocol, and we don't have the black box yet. And what I think you have to point out, though, for Boeing, this comes at a time when this stock has been on a heroic run. The last 2 times they had these kind of recalls, the company, actually, the jury was really out in terms of their production, in terms of really how efficient they were, and effectively getting things off the assembly line at least. I think the company's had a phenomenal safety record for decades. Let's be clear. So, the stock on valuation wasn't terribly cheap at this point. Guy pointed out the free cash flow dynamics. I don't think you have to chase into this one. But do I think that there's a major sell-off coming? No, when I think that demand for commercial aircraft globally continues to get better. And I think the order book is not really going to fall apart here. And look at Airbus. I mean, Airbus, which was always thought of to be, the very weak sister, by the way, is at all-time highs right now. And Airbus arguably is rallying not just because of Boeing's weakness, but Airbus has been rallying off the charts for 2 years. It's outperformed the S&P by 25% when European stocks have been awful.
All right, Pete, what do you say? Because we look at Boeing at 377 here.
It's very intriguing.
Defending the 200-day moving average. Yep. It's also close, about $40 off of the low shortly after the Lion Air crash. So you're back to then.
Yeah, and if you go back to Christmas Eve when it was under 300, and then this big run up to 460, and now here we are pulled back. Call it 380. It's a little less than 380 right now. What I think is intriguing is the president, I think, did do them a favor. I also think that you were pointing out, Karen, that there seems to be a little bit of stability at this point. You talked about some of the volume as well, Guy, but I think what it sets up for me is when you look around right now, what is the VIX trading at? It's 12, 13, something like that. There was no scare last week whatsoever. You look at implied volatility in Boeing for all the right reasons, it's very high. But if you like the stock right now, you buy that stock and you're selling calls against it. You're getting almost $20 for an April at the money call right now to sell against that. And what you're also looking at, the implied volatility has gone from 16 to 40. I mean, these are the opportunities that a guy like me lives for. I mean, I'm always looking for opportunities as long as the story is intact. We don't really have the full story yet, obviously. I mean, that's still more to come. Yeah. But if you're willing to say, you know what, I want to take a shot here, that's the way you do it.
I'm also wondering if the Dreamliner, and maybe this is a question for Tim, if the Dreamliner incident is fully comparable in that it was something mechanical and also there weren't fatal crashes involved with the batteries.
Fair enough. Absolutely.
Which completely changes the equation, no?
Look, the liability dynamics here could be extraordinary. We don't even really know what they are because we really haven't seen this before. And again, going back to their records. So, yes, I agree. I'm really talking about a stock that would have some kind of an overhang and how it's tended to behave in the past after you've had a grounding. And even before, look, in 2013, I believe it took 2 months, maybe almost 3 months before you actually saw the FAA put them back up in the air. And yet the stock did most of its damage within the first 6 weeks of that, and that was really a sideways trade. It wasn't a trade down. It even started to rally before they went back up.
You know what's going to happen?
What's going to happen? I don't know what's going to happen. I know the show's going to last for another 52 minutes.
The Senate's going to call them to Capitol Hill. Dennis Muhlenberg's going to be up there, you know.
Going to be nasty.
Is that bad for the stock?
Right.
Sometimes
Is that headline risk?
You know, it's to Tim's point. Sometimes when you look when Facebook went and testified, that stock was 152 at the time. I think it was last March or so. And then obviously that stock rallied to $205, and you saw what happened subsequently. So I think it could be a great entry point. And look, do I think it can go lower from here? Yeah, maybe. And there's clearly headline risk. But you look at the volume that's traded over the last couple days. You go back and say, has the fundamental story of Boeing changed? I don't think it has. Yes, clearly these are tragic incidents. But are people going to totally change their order book? I don't think that's going to happen. I mean, again, if you're going to go from this plane to an A320, the backlog for the A320 is longer. So
5 years.
Exactly. So I don't think you can feasibly do that. Now, if they come back and say there's something fundamentally wrong with the aircraft, then it's a completely different conversation. Again, I'm not an expert. I don't think we're there yet.
What's the impact, do you think, on the airlines? The airlines who have to swap out the planes, who have to lease new aircraft?
Well, for the U.S. airlines, it's actually less than some of the other ones
Yes,
around the world,
in
right?
terms of the MAX 8s in their
in
fleets.
terms of how they're going to shift the mix of their fleet. I think for Southwestern, that's probably the biggest one that'll be impacted. But I don't even know actually if we're going to see any big impact here. And I think if there are Senate hearings, Boeing does have an outstanding record, so. They do have, plus they're big supporters of the administration. So I don't know how difficult that will be, actually.
Just really quick, I also think if anything, airlines have capacity issues we get concerned about when they start to get aggressive. This isn't going to push them to be more aggressive on capacity. If anything, it pulls them back in. I don't think this is a major deal.